Sit-down panel moderated by Jeremy Reymer, founder and CEO of Driver Reach.
Thank you very much, Matt. Great to see everybody. Before we start, though, I want to say, a lot of us, this is the first time we've all been able to get together. So I want to thank Travis and the rest of the CDLLife team for putting this together. You guys join me in a round of applause. A lot of times we get together in February, and we didn't have that opportunity this year, and CDLLife did a great job of filling a void, especially a topic that is so important to all of us, but to the industry in general. Got four very distinguished people sitting next to me, leaders in the industry, seasoned veteran leaders, and we're going to pick their brain. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask some questions as well. So make sure you've got your cards filled out. And I realize it's toasty in here. And I also realize that right out there, you can warm your insides with some cocktails. So I'm aware of that. And I appreciate you being in here. Some of you brought your cocktails in, which is also appreciated. Bourbon on the rocks for me, if anyone's listening. So I'm going to introduce the four panelists and ask them to kind of give you a little bit of background about them before we dive into the questions. So I'll start in order of from my right here, from your right to left. And so that's Mark Colson, President and CEO, your very own Alabama Trucking Association.
And for those of you on the left side of the room, I'm sorry if you're talking to the podium. So, but no, thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Travis and CDLLife for hosting this event. And thank you for choosing to host it in the great state of Alabama. It's my privilege to get to serve as president of the Alabama Trucking Association. And, we were joking up here a little bit ago that, we're a little bit preaching to the choir today. If you're in this room today, you've been called, you're a leader in our industry already. But it's what we do after we leave this room is what's going to be important. But myself, I got into the trucking business about a year and a half ago. Now, really 2 years ago, June of 2019, I started with the Alabama Trucking Association. Prior to that, I spent about 13 years working with our state chamber of commerce in Alabama, advocating for the business community. But interestingly, in how God works in your life, I grew up changing truck tires for my family's tire business called Blowout Tire Company in Chilton County, Alabama. So if any of y'all need any tire work, my dad's still down there changing tires. It's just right down the road. It's about 50 miles south of here. For those of you not familiar from Alabama, it's peach country actually, and most people think of it as compete with Georgia or South Carolina, but for those of you familiar with 65, you can stop I-65. You can stop on the interstate and buy peaches in Clanton. But I remind people that I'm from where they grow them, not where you can buy them. So that is how I got into trucking. But I would just say that I'm honored and probably not qualified to sit on the panel with my colleagues up here. So looking forward to having a discussion today and learning what we can take away from this room and go out and do our jobs better.
Thank you, Mark. Sherri Garner Brumbaugh, who is the chair this year of the American Trucking Association and is a fantastic leader in the industry and an ambassador of the industry for many, many years. And Sherri, please let us know a little bit more.
Well, thank you very much. And great to be here and enjoy company and those that love the trucking industry as I do. I'm a second generation trucker. I'm a truck driver's daughter and proud of it. Our business is a 61-year-old business in trucking, dry freight, located in Northwest Ohio. So I am a teacher by trade, but a trucker by heritage. And after teaching, I was a band director for 5 years. I am a graduate of the Ohio State University. I know, it's really dangerous in Alabama to say that. But so I taught for several years and grew up in the business, washed trucks, mowed the lawn. Those are the things that when you're part of a heritage and part of a legacy, those are the kinds of things that you do. So glad to be here.
Thank you very much, Sherri. And Kevin Burch is the VP of Sales and Government Affairs from Martin Transportation Systems, also as a former chairman of the American Trucking Association.
Thanks, Jeremy, and it's once again, it's a pleasure to be here today. probably read in the bio there, 47 years in trucking. My father was in 44 years, and I never thought that I would pass him in the years and whatnot. Unfortunately, I'm not a Buckeye. I'm in Dayton, Ohio, which is Buckeye land, but I'm a Wolverine up north. So we've got a Ohio State, and yeah, well, that was the best joke I think I'm going to have today. So, but seriously, my entire life has been in trucking. Sold the company approximately 3 years ago to Martin Transportation Systems out of Grand Rapids. They're a 100% automotive carrier, and Jet Express, who I sold the company to, was also 100%, so it was a good marriage. But in saying that, I started out with automotive, born and raised in Flint, Michigan, back when they had good water up there and the unemployment wasn't real bad. But, I started out as a third shift dispatcher and going to school. I appreciate terminal managers because they are the true backbone, if you will, of the trucking industry, and recruiters. So I've kind of done all the jobs that have been involved in trucking, and went undercover back about 12 years ago, undercover boss type to get my CDL. It's the only thing that I hadn't done in trucking, and I thought if I'm going to shake hands and hire drivers and look at them face to face, that one day I'd get a CDL. So at 55 years old, I went in and got CDL and flunked my first test, but went back and got my license. That's a true story. So we've got a couple things in common there. Only thing I've ever done, I would not do anything different. I'm looking forward to Q&A later on, telling the stories. So thank you for allowing me to be here in front of you.
Thank you, Kevin. And one thing I'll say before I introduce Ellen is, if you know Kevin well at all, he's always got one of these pins on. And if you come up to him and you don't have one, he will give you one. And so I've got one. Looks like Mark's my first taker. I'm guessing Kevin might have a few more, and if so, please hit him up afterwards. Something that when we visit the Hill, Capitol Hill in DC, it's something that we wear on our lapels, with pride as we're speaking to our congressmen and women. So appreciate your support there. Now, Ellen Voie, President and CEO of Women in Trucking. I think I've known Ellen maybe longer than anybody on this panel, and her involvement in the industry is pretty special. So Ellen, please.
Thanks, Jeremy. Although I've known Kevin for a long time, and Sherri. So I actually think I have you beat. I earned my diploma in traffic and transportation management in 1979, and I just did the numbers. That's 42 years. So, and yes, I know I look way younger than that. So, but seriously, I was working for Schneider National, and I was the manager of recruiting retention programs, and that was in 2006. I've heard you say there weren't roles like that back then, and there were. And they told me to figure out how to attract and retain non-traditional groups, and one of the groups was women. And at the time, I was getting my pilot's license, and I belonged to a women in aviation group, and it struck me, why isn't there a group for women in trucking? So in 2007, I put together a board of directors, got all the legal paperwork, and in March of 2007, Women in Trucking was born. And in our first year, we attracted 500 members, and we're at over 5,000, about 5,200 in 12 countries. And so obviously we've struck a nerve in this industry, right? So my whole passion is to empower, attract, retain, and advance women in this industry. So, and so my slant on this will be gender equity. Fantastic.
So as you see, we've got some seasoned veterans here. And by the way, 1979.
Mm-hmm. Was that the year you were born?
No, I'm sadly older than that, but I look like it, right?
Yeah.
That's where you were going with that. So we're going to get started with some of our scripted questions and make sure that we have enough time for you and the audience. I'm going to start back here with Mark. We've been talking today a lot about the spend, and I think everybody in here who's advertising, marketing, is spending more than probably they ever have. So marketing budget versus higher pay. Let's discuss how one versus the other impacts your bottom line. Pay raise isn't a simple solution, right? It's easier to spend ad dollars as sort of a quick fix than to invest in retention. Can you, or at least some think that, can you elaborate on the dilemma of pay raises versus advertising dollars?
Well, I don't run a trucking company and never have. So I'm gonna defer the specifics of that question to my colleagues who have many years of experience in that. But I want to address it because it's an important question for those of you in the business, but I want to highlight something a little more zoomed out that the problem that question is addressing is a deeper problem that we've talked about here today. And, the challenges that we face right now isn't about one, and there will always be the question of how do you reward and retain drivers with benefit programs, and how do you attract them with marketing budgets? And that's a good question, and we'll address it. So I'm basically not answering your question.
He's a politician.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm a lobbyist. That's worse.
Right. Well, you said it.
No, but the problem that we're talking about is not one carrier or one group of carriers. It is a systemic shortage of people coming into our business and being trained to come into our business. So what we need to talk about on it's a cultural shift, and that culture shift has been addressed here today. How do you do it? Culture change is hard. So one thing I've said if I'm giving a speech to non-trucking folks, and I'm talking about our industry, I'm trying to advocate for us and share a little bit about what it means to be a trucker, because I've been in the industry so long, I know what it means, right? But I am a trucker. I may wear a tie, and I'm proud of it. And I think that's something that we all represent, is that we don't need to back down from being truckers. Whether you're the dispatcher, whether you're the lobbyist, whether you're the accountant, the lawyer, the truck driver, the diesel tech, we're all truckers. And when I ask those groups, think in your head, close your eyes and think in your head, what do you think when you hear trucker? And then I ask the question, what is the hardest thing? One of the hardest things to do in this life. One of the hardest things to do in this life is to change someone's perception once that's in your head. So to address the question, and then I'll stop talking so that they can answer the real question of marketing budgets versus higher salary, is that if your employee deserves a pay raise and ask for one, and you are the employer or the manager, and you have the power to increase their pay, that's changing the facts. And that's all good and well, and we have to change facts sometimes, and you sometimes have the power to change facts. But if that pay raise isn't enough, and they don't perceive it to be enough, did changing the facts work? So when we look at so that's on the specific question, and then we look at the bigger question of how do we attract a larger group of people to enter the workforce pipeline for trucking? Part of that is, and the big hard thing to do there, is change the perception of what it means to be a trucker. So that's what we're going to talk a little about here today. So that's a long answer.
Who wants to take a crack at?
Well, to balance that for my organization, I always think about my legacy drivers. I think about, what do they see? What do they, people underestimate truck drivers, and they are smart people, and they have a lot of windshield time. So they have a lot of time to think, and they have a lot of time to do math and see what you're spending in marketing or sign-on bonus or what. And we always, this tug of war of, hey, you're spending so much money on getting the first year driver, or what about me? So it's always a balancing act. We try to be very strategic about what we're spending our dollars on. And if we're doing this big marketing program, we want to keep in mind of our legacy drivers too.
Drivers often complain about the lack of respect. In fact, a lot of times that's their number one reason for turnover. And if that is the number one walkaway issue for drivers, then how can the industry, how can we improve the level of respect that drivers experience? And that's something I'd specifically like to ask Ellen.
Well, I like this question. So research has shown that for every one negative comment you give to your spouse, your child, coworker, it takes 5 positives to overcome that. So what messages are you sending your drivers? Like your safety department. Is the safety department only contacting drivers when they've screwed up on paperwork or done something in the truck wrong? How many positive messages is your safety department sending to your drivers? How about operations? Are you sending at least 5 positive messages to your drivers for every one negative or punitive? Because it's got to be, they're going to feel so much more proud if they're feeling that they're appreciated. So think about that, 5 to 1.
Anybody want to add to that? Okay. We have such an opportunity I think to improve the experience, and I think kind of leading to what Ellen just shared, so important to make sure that we're providing a great experience for the drivers that we're onboarding and so on. And specifically, Kevin, how do drivers experience orientation, and how do you think that can be improved and leading to a better experience and better workforce development, better retention?
That orientation period, that's what you're talking about, I think, is
Right.
so important. It's key. First impressions are always important. There's over 500,000 registered DOT companies, trucking companies, and I believe all 500,000 all operate in a different way. One of the common things that we have with those 500,000 companies are OEMs, the tractors, the trailers, and so many IT units and whatnot that we have in common. But it's the culture, it's the orientation, it's the process. I really believe it's from the top down. Anybody that says that growth is from the underneath and it grows up and whatnot, in trucking companies, it's from the top down. It isn't like the old DOT audit. I'm starting to age myself, where somebody comes in and gives you the badge and they're going to do an audit, and you give them the worst area, there's no air conditioning, similar to like what we have in here tonight, a little bit warm, and dim lights and all that. No, that orientation should be, some of you here probably, how many have like a 4-day orientation process? That's probably a little bit low, a couple, 2, 3. Most of them probably 1 to 2 days. So you want to make it comfortable. First impressions are so important. And that's why we're going to talk later on about supervisors and dispatch and shop people. But let's get back to the orientation. Have it in a room that's close by to the restrooms. Have it where the applicant, if you will, when they finish up the process, understands what the day is going to be so that he can plan. If you're going to have a 6-hour deal, when does he get a break or she get a break? And are you going to buy lunch? In our case, we let the person whatever they'd like to eat for lunch. We let them know ahead of time. Give them a menu. Ask for anything that we can do. Make it comfortable, because that is such a key position. Make it quiet so they're not bothered. At our company now, because of all the rules, we are the most regulated, deregulated industry in the world. Anybody agree on that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember the 1980 Deregulation Act. We've been deregulated for 40 years, but we're getting more regulations. But that's another story, another day. But the bottom line is, there are certain things now for safety and for policy that you do yourself an injustice if you don't let the applicant know right from the get-go what the vacations are, what the pay, what's expected. So that orientation is important. And there's nothing wrong, Jeremy, of walking in and making sure during that orientation process, is there anything you can do? Don't just leave that applicant like, oh, I've got one, finally got one in, the last 2 didn't show up, I've got a live one here. Communication is what it's all about. So provide that energy and talk about your company while you're doing it. It's a whole process. It doesn't happen.
Sherri, anything as a carrier, anything to add to that from an orientation perspective?
Sure. I think at the end of the day, folks want to know who they're working for, and so I try to stop in. We have the luxury, I have 80 trucks, so I have the luxury of knowing or having the time to stop in and saying, hey. But I'm a mother of millennials and a Gen Z kid, and they're all about experiences. And my oldest one, who's in IT, came home one weekend from Cincinnati, and he says, I'm changing my job. And we're like, okay, why are you changing? He says, I don't know who I'm working for. The company is so large, I don't know who I'm working for anymore. And that's just not me. I said, could it be because you grew up in a small, business? And he's like, no, I need to know what's important to the CEO, why my old company, the old CEO, we used to volunteer. That's really important to millennials. Being able to volunteer and give back to their community. And so that I try to stop in. We try to do truckers against trafficking. We don't try, we do truckers against trafficking at every orientation, at the beginning orientation. the individual may not continue to work for Garner. It may not be a good fit. But I know that that individual, at least when they came through the doors at Garner, they received Truckers Against Trafficking training. So that's important. They know that that's important to the CEO. Also, Rees Across America is very important to us, and we try to engage them in those activities. So the other thing I like to try to do, in pre-COVID, I'd like to go out and be in the truck for a week, actually experience what it's like to pack up that bag, that sleeping bag, and crawl up in the truck for a week with one of my female driver trainers and get that experience. So I know what it's like to walk 25 dock doors in the rain or the cold to get to the shipping office, or getting to that shipper and coming across, those folks that are in those not so pleasant folks that they get at the customer, and they say, "Did you see how they talked to me?" And then my next call is to my salesman, right? It's a 5-alarm fire, if one of our drivers complain about a customer. So I think it's important when those first orientations that I can say, hey, if you have a problem, this goes right up to the top office.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think, you and Kevin both hit on the importance of first impressions. And there's two things that you never get back, or it's really hard, to Mark's point: first impressions and time. And I say that because another thing that I think is really important is to make sure that process, that orientation process, is as efficient as possible. If you can whittle that down and whittle away inefficiencies. And some of the challenges, I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about image, because that's a really big challenge for every single one of us, and especially as we need to get new entrants into the industry. So I want to ask Kevin, who's somebody who's been such a great ambassador from an image standpoint, what can we do? What are the things that can be done to improve both the image of the industry and truck drivers as well?
Thanks, Jeremy. And I think you've got the clicker up there, do you, that I can borrow?
Is that it?
Yeah. Have you got, okay.
Do you want to hear?
Yeah, which one is it?
I would imagine it's the one that.
Is it right here?
Everything's so
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. I've done it the last few years. How many of the audience here have kids? Raise your hand. Oh, wow. Productive. How about grandkids? Okay, those that raise their hand, how many of you would promote your child to be in the trucking industry? Raise your hand. Well, I'm impressed. That's pretty good. I had a Chamber of Commerce here 2-3 weeks ago down in Cincinnati, and there was a lady in front, and she went like this. She wasn't sure whether she should raise her hand or not, and she was, kind of caught in it. But I tell you what, I've been in a room with 200 or 300 people, and maybe 3 or 4 would raise their hand. There's over 7 million of us that are in this trucking industry. 7 million. 3.5, now it's about 3.6 million are CDL card-carrying license holders and professional men and women drivers. So what people say, well, Kevin, how can that be? That's 300 or 3 million. Who are they? Well, they're the OEMs, they're the truck stops. There's people in this room. They're the recruiters, or dispatchers, shop people, the tech people. Over 3 million people. We actually contribute to 5% of the gross national product. 1 out of 17 Americans are involved in our industry. Now, I've heard it all day today. It's kind of nice to be in right from the beginning. It's been a great show today, the session. But, it goes back to the image and what can we do and whatnot. What we can do, and it was talked about just prior to this session, is tell our story. Why is it so hard for us to tell our story? I remember 20-some years ago, I was at a real fancy $200 a plate dinner. Somebody came up to me and they were going around there, and one of the gentlemen didn't know who I was and said, what do you do for a living? I said, I'm in trucking. Dead silence. Nobody had a couple of drinks, 3 or 4 people there, and then they started talking about the Detroit Tigers in the baseball game. I got the message. I realized it. So I brought some slides. Only take a few seconds. But the image, we've talked about, I think every meeting that I've been in today has talked about the image. So way on the left, I'm just going to go through these rather. Thank you, truckers. That was for a meeting we had down in the Carolinas. Those are actually beach chairs because nobody was allowed to be out there in the beach and whatnot. So we had our meeting and they wanted to thank us. How about the sign in the middle? Thank you, truckers. And there's a daughter there. Her dad is a truck driver. That's her way of saying thank you. Somebody this morning asked, what can we do? I think it was a gentleman right there in the middle. Was asking about the image or what can we do. TruckingMovesAmerica.com. If you do that, you can find out a lot about what you can do. And everybody here in this room should be able to get on and see it. So, and then there's a handwritten note there from Tyler Carr that wanted to thank the driver for all the deliveries that he was making. Here's America Thanks You. This was a billboard campaign that we did. Trucking Moves America Forward, co-founder 6 years ago, and we're well on our way. These are donated 50% by state associations, the other 50% by Trucking Moves America Forward. During the pandemic, the top one delivering top right, America's Recovery, that's in Dayton, Ohio. America Thanks You, thank a trucker. Boy, this is what it's all about. Tell your story. When you leave here, this has been a great session, but the image thing, we haven't done a poor job. We've done a pathetically bad job in the last 20 years in telling what we do and why we do moving America's goods safe. Continue to educate, telling our story, trucking careers with a view. We've seen some of these at the bottom right, breakfast foods. How many footballs, how many hot dogs, how many turkeys, that's all us. We all take it for granted. I'm really proud of the fact in the top left there, it takes 7 million people to move America, including my mom. And Ellen just said it earlier, what we need to do is put a face behind what we do. Put a mom and a dad and a daughter and put those people, Jeremy, that's what it's all about. And that's going to answer the gentleman's question earlier, that's going to answer the question about the image. 7 million people, there it is. One's driving, is trained to drive this truck. We've also got them special made for tankers. I'm here to tell you, I'm not, I don't have an armful of watches to sell here today, but these trailer wraps, our goal was to hit 200 a year. Well, we've sold 300 in 4 years of the trailer wraps, $3,500, and that's the both sides and the back. That's everything included. So if you're interested in that, see me later on. Here's some more trailer wraps. How can you not like that image? The lady up on the top left, that's one of our drivers for Martin Transportation. Black Heritage Month was Joe Pryor below there. Here's Sherri with Women in Trucking. These are all things that if you go on the site, you can pull out, but this is telling our story. And you can customize these trailer wraps with the owner of your trucking company, the wife of the owner of your trucking company, the driver of the month, the driver of the year.
The husband of the owner of your
the husband of the owner of the trucking company. Thank you. Here we go again with the sensualities and whatnot. People, that's what moves America. We've got the hard job in this room, like somebody said earlier about talking to the choir here. We're all wanting good professional people, but don't hesitate to tell your story. Jeremy tells a story. If there was 8 days in a week, he'd talk 8 days. He's that into it because he wants to appreciate the drivers.
Absolutely.
Holiday ornament, see me later on. What we started 5 years ago. How many people have got Christmas trees and you have friends over and whatnot? Why not tell the story or give it to a customer, give it to a friend? This is this year's Happy Holidays. And so that's some of the areas that I'm trying to tell you that the image part is important. One last part on that, because I've only got a couple of responses on questions, so I'm going to take advantage of this image one. It was 2009 in Dayton, Ohio. I got a phone call from the principal where the city I work in, just south of Dayton. And he said, we're going to have career day. And I've heard this earlier about careers and getting younger people involved. And that's that SAFE Act that we're talking about that we want to get approved. So he says, Mr. Burch, I know you've got a small trucking company. We've got a career day and we're going to have some outside careers. We're thinking about having a tire company and a couple of trucking companies that would come in. I was elated. I couldn't believe it. I got the date, and about 2 days before the event, I got a phone call from him, and I figured it was just to kind of confirm it. He says, "Mr. Burch, I don't know how to say this, but I was at the meeting just last night, and I didn't realize how many parents were on this committee. And when they found out we were having tool and die and trucking, they asked if we could have just keep it to healthcare and financials." So I knew back in 2009, I see some heads nod, 2009, that I Heart Trucks button and the image, it was going to be an uphill battle, but I wasn't going to let that defeat me. So when I was traveling around, I've been wearing this I Heart Truck button since 2009. And when I travel on an airplane or whatnot, I get on the flight attendant. "Oh, that's nice. You got a nice button there. Is that big trucks or small trucks?" It's a conversation piece. But several of them will say, the flight attendants, mostly female, by the way, would say, "If you like trucks so much, how come you're on this plane?" And I'm thinking, really? I'm going to tell you why. Because I think this plane's a Boeing, and most of the parts to build this came by a truck.
That's right.
And guess what? The beverage is right behind you. I think that was a truck it was a small truck, but a bigger truck brought those beverages. So that's the story that you got to tell on that thing. To get back, and I'll finish the question here about image. Wouldn't you know that 2019, I get a call from the same school that 10 years prior, we've got a nice zip code down there, but guess what? 10 years later, a different principal called and said, "By the way, we'd like to have a trucking industry. Can you come on down?" So I got the road team, America's road team, got a tractor, a trailer, and I got a couple of road team drivers. And they had like 60 different occupations, which I thought was pretty nice. 2 school teachers came up later on and said, "You know, we've been telling the administration, the school administration, that not every child, even though we live in a nice zip code, goes to college. Thank you so much for talking about the trucking industry and how vital it is." So that, that's where it starts. It starts with those, and this was 11th and 12th graders. And then they voted on, all these 60 some companies or whatever that was in the gymnasium. We were there all day. We were ranked number 3 out of all those that were interested in that. And I thought that was nice. One last comment: Centerville, Ohio, very wealthy neighborhood and whatnot, had called about 2 or 3 months later because they heard what had happened. They had 800 students sign up. Because you had to sign up. 800 students signed up. And we had arc welding, we had American Airlines rep, and guess what? We had a trucker from Dayton, Ohio that was talking about it. And they had 800 people there. So that gives you an example. If you've got a chance to talk about what you do, when you leave today, try to tell your story.
Thanks, Kevin. And you mentioned that the industry's done a poor job the last 20, 30 years, right? And I wouldn't disagree, but I do think that we have certainly improved recently, and especially this past year with COVID and the onset of that, and how not just the industry responded, but how the recognition of the industry responded, and what an opportunity we have to leverage that as much as we can going forward and not let people forget. And you heard the phrase, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." This is a perfect opportunity. This is a perfect example of leveraging that. And what comes to mind is the Imagine video that was put out. And the ATA, I know, shared that around the country just probably 2 or 3 years ago. If you haven't seen that, I don't know how you can probably Google, American Trucking Association Imagine a video or YouTube and find that. It's really awesome. It will get you'll get emotional watching it. And I think that's so relevant, especially in the backdrop of what we've just gone through. Mark, I would like to ask you, though, if you can add, is there anything you'd like to add from an image standpoint?
Yeah, I thought Kevin did a great job. I'll just give you the high point. So one of the big complaints we have in the industry is trial lawyers, right? We don't like trial lawyers on billboards, trial lawyers in the policy in the legislature, on TV advertising against our industry. If you ever notice what they do, what don't they do? They don't talk about your company particularly. They don't talk about the driver. They talk about the object. They objectify our industry. Our job is to personify our industry. So in your jobs every day, the people, and I would make one, Kevin, I would make one change to this. I would say I love truckers. I would love truckers. Anytime I talk, I've changed everything our team does to talk about the people in the industry, not just the industry at large. So how do we, in every word we say, in every tweet we tweet, in every thing we write, everything we do, how do we talk about the people? Because our enemy is talking about the objects that people don't like. So that's it.
Jeremy, just to add one other item there. I don't know whether you recall, a few years ago, we were able to get a tractor trailer in the White House. It doesn't matter if you're a D or an R or an I. It really, truly doesn't. But when we were talking about how does the image make a difference and how do young kids in elementary and toot the horn like we used to, the Knights of the Road is what the truckers used to be. Somebody said that earlier about the truckers of the 60s and 70s. Well, the Knights of the Roads, like Jeremy said, we are now the heroes again, all right? The President of the United States got up into that truck. He wasn't supposed to get up there. The Secret Service was not told that they had everything planned out. He was not supposed to get in that truck, especially with the road team captain from ATA. And he certainly wasn't supposed to shut the door because I was right next to the Social Security or the Secret Service. But what did he do when he got in there? He tooted the horn. It was all over the news. I don't know how many people saw that, but that's the stuff that's what I'm getting at is the image. This is the best time, like Jeremy said, let's not lose this time when they're the heroes. I can't remember the last time we've given 3 raises in a year. So the raises, the money's coming up. We talked about this earlier. It's not all about money, but and it's not going to keep going forever and ever. But this is the opportunity. And Jeremy, what you and your company and the other ones do as far as recruiting, this is the time. This is low fruit right now. This is the time to really show how good we are in recruiting and in telling our story on exactly what we do in moving America's goods.
Well, what you didn't share was that John Lex, the America's Road Team, captain, pulls out his phone in the cab of the truck with the President of the United States against the Secret Service's will and says, "Come on, let's take a selfie." And they about flipped out, but that was so cool. And then he shared that, and that of course went viral. That was a really neat experience. And if you don't know John Lex, that's a hero as well. We saw Ken earlier today, and John is cut from that same cloth. Just a special person. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about women. That's one thing we know we need more women in trucking, and I don't know anybody who is more dedicated and passionate about that than Ellen. So what can we do to attract more women to the industry?
You know that I do 2-hour presentations on this topic. So I'm only going to take a few minutes, but I just want to tell you what we're doing at Women in Trucking Association. And how many of you are members of the Women in Trucking Association? All right. For the rest of you, it's womenintrucking.org. I expect you to all go there and sign up. I'm going to go with your theme. I love your theme. Tell stories. Okay. So when someone says, I don't see anyone like me in a truck or in a job or whatever, we need to change that. We need to change that perception. So we need to tell stories. So I'll tell you what we're doing. And Leah talked about the Girl Scout. We created the Girl Scout transportation patch. The Boy Scouts had one, Girl Scouts didn't. So we worked with the Greater Chicago, Northern Indiana Girl Scout region and wrote the curriculum. And so we have a book that goes with it that talks about the grain from the field goes to a bakery and what? A truck. Bakery to packaging and what? A truck. Packaging and who's the final mile? So we have to tell our stories. We want little kids to look at a truck and go, Mommy, Daddy, that could be my cookies in there. That could be my milk in there, in that dairy truck or whatever. So we have to tell their stories and we have to make it personal to them. We also created a Women in Trucking doll so kids can play with the doll. One of you here is going to win. I didn't bring the doll because it's kind of bulky, but I brought a certificate, so somebody's going to win that doll along with a free registration to our conference, by the way. But telling stories. So we have a member of the month. Every month we feature a member, tell their story. We have influential women in trucking. We have the distinguished woman in logistics. We have a driver of the year. In fact, you saw one of her pictures up there. It was Nikki Weaver, who was our driver of the year this year. We have an image team. And our image team goes out and does media, a lot of media. They do product reviews. They do talk to different groups, schools, whatever. But the ride-alongs, I'm really proud of. We have given ride-alongs to FMCSA administrators. We've given ride-along. And now think about this. Daphne Jefferson, and I love her dearly. She's a good friend. But when she was the deputy administrator at the FMCSA, which is, by the way, making the rules that regulate all your trucks. She had never been in a truck. So we gave her a 2-day ride in a truck. We've given a lot of media people, USA Today, New York Times, Wall Street. Oh, you weren't supposed to show it yet.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's my last one. So our image team does ride-alongs with legislators, senators. Our Senator Johnson, we're going to give Tammy Baldwin one because she helped us get a bill passed. So it's telling your story. It's telling your story to people who are influential. The image team gets on when people call us and ask for someone to be on a TV show. We get them on there. So we've had drivers on Ricky Lake a while ago. We had a driver featured in Oprah magazine, Dr. Oz show. And last year, just before she went off, and it wasn't our fault, but we had a driver on the Megyn Kelly show. And she was talking about how she gets to see sunrises and sunsets, and our phones lit off the hook the next day. All these women were calling and saying, I want to do what she does. So we have to get out there and tell our stories to the non-trucking media so that they see women doing that job. So again, lots of recognition programs, the ride-alongs, and now you can do that. Okay, isn't this awesome? This is our new driver ambassador trailer, and that was donated by Walmart, so kudos to Walmart for giving us the trailer. And the tractor is a Schneider tractor because we also took the Schneider driver. She works for Schneider 2 weeks a month, and she'll work for Women in Trucking 1 week a month. That is going to be a hands-on, you walk inside, it will have everything from could you be a good truck driver? What skills do you need? Even the clothing, we've had that donated. We have a simulator in there. It'll just be a walking educational trailer that our driver ambassador is going to be taking around the country to schools, to trade shows maybe, but mostly like high schools and things like that. So that's our driver ambassador program. And we did a contest to name it, and the name is Whitney, for Women in Trucking WIT. So it's Whitney. And you should be, isn't it pretty awesome? That is pretty awesome. And we wanted her strong, just to tell that story. So when you see that going down the road, that's our new driver ambassador program. And I think it should be hitting the road in August. So when you talk about how to get more women in the industry, everyone says, like, when will you be happy? And I tell people, I'll be happy when nobody gives a second thought to a female backing. Somebody mentioned this morning that the biggest thing is when a female driver is backing up to a loading dock, and everyone's watching her. When nobody's surprised when a woman jumps out of the cab of a truck, and it's no big issue anymore. So that's when I'll be happy, and maybe we won't need women in trucking by then, but I'll be retired by then. Although I got my CDL about the same time as Kevin did, so I could come back as a truck driver.
Fun fact. Women are safer drivers in statistically every category. Yep. That's proven.
Well, and I'd like to add something to that, Jeremy, because 14 years ago when I started Women in Trucking, I would go to group after group after group and go, do you have that broken down by gender? Do you have that broken down by gender? Nobody broke things down by gender. And now, ATRI even came out with a crash causation study. And when Rebecca called me the night before the news hit, she goes, oh, Ellen, you're going to love this. 20%. Men are 20% more likely to be in a crash, intersections, at night, curves, you name it. So I told FMCSA, I know how to make our roads 20% safer. I have the solution.
Good point.
All right, I'll stop. I could do this for hours. So just join Women in Trucking,
I want to ask Mark, again, this is a common theme, right? We're always going to talk about, from a workforce development standpoint, getting new entrants into the industry, getting more, equalizing the gender disparity. Mark, should companies be fostering partnerships and programs with colleges to recruit talent? Thoughts there?
It's imperative that they do, but more importantly, I'll give you an example. So in the state of Alabama, the construction industry has a coordinated campaign to annually spend $500,000 a year to feed the workforce for their industry. The corrections industry, the corrections department for the state, spends $700,000 a year to organize a coordinated campaign to feed the workforce pipeline to get more corrections officers in prisons. You know how much in the state of Alabama is spent on a coordinated effort to drive the workforce pipeline for the trucking industry? Anybody want to guess? Ellen can guess? $0. That's about to change. So yes, your company needs to develop relationships, but we also have to come together as an industry because no one's coming to save us. No one's coming to fix it for us. We are not an incentivized industry. I'm glad there are incentivized. I'm glad we give tax dollars to recruit companies to come here because we move their stuff. But no one, and trust me, I mean, I may be new to this business, but I've talked to the smartest people. I'm sitting with 3 of them in our business, in this state, in this nation, the smartest people in workforce development in this state, in this nation. And you know what solutions they have to fix our workforce problems? Very few. So it is us here that have to do it. So one of the approaches we're taking as a state trucking association, and I think the way to shape our mind, yes, you need relationships with our colleges and other training programs, whether they're public or private. And there's a couple private here today. Just so you know, there are 15 public truck driving schools in Alabama located at community colleges. There are 9 diesel tech programs in Alabama located at community colleges. There are a couple of private truck driving schools in Alabama. But we have to find ways to target the constituencies like women, minorities, veterans in a meaningful way, put the messaging together that will motivate them to seek those training programs, make sure that they can access the training programs in an efficient way, make sure the training programs themselves, which I'll address one issue here, are effective. One of the biggest problems we've identified, and you know this, is instructors. An instructor makes or breaks a program, just like your training program. The trainer is not the curriculum. The curriculum is important, but the trainer makes and breaks a training program. Same goes for diesel tech instructors and CDL instructors. And we have a systemic problem in this state, and I would just assume everywhere, because people who are good at that, probably especially like diesel technicians, they make a lot of money, especially if they live in a rural community that might need those diesel technicians. They're going to be making more money. So we have to be a partner with our college and education institutions at the high school level and the college level to make sure that we are partnering to make sure they have the tools to train our future workforce. So that's a big problem. And then once they get their credentials, we want them to come work in trucking. We don't want our diesel techs that we train to go work for the trains. We don't want our CDL drivers to go work for, well, I mean, if you're a CDL driver, you're going to drive a truck for somebody, so that's good. But we want them to be, we want them to be in our industry. So these are problems that we can have solutions. But you know what it's going to take to do things like that? It is a long-term, relentless focus and approach that you never succeed fully, but you never quit. And you have to continuously evolve. And I'll tell you, I challenge our trucking executives in Alabama because they have they have a very short patience. They want the problem to be fixed yesterday. And you know what? It costs money. It's expensive. It hurts. And you got to wait. But you know what? If we don't do it, it's not going to get done. So, yes, you need to build relationships with colleges.
That's passion. I'm going to, just for time's sake, I'm going to skip a few questions, some that are a little bit redundant, because I want to make sure that we've got an opportunity for you in the audience. Now, Sherri, what trends are you seeing in the industry? Good, maybe good and bad, not just good or bad.
Well, I think some of the good things we're seeing, we're talking about our essential workers, and our drivers are certainly recognized this last year as essential workers. And they, my drivers, they took the whole, we all huddled down in our offices or in our homes, and what were our drivers? Our drivers were out on the road, and the foot traffic through our office stopped pretty much, and I felt really bad about that because I couldn't have that interaction. But when I did see our drivers, I'm like, thank you so much for doing what you're doing and being out there. And they just all took it in stride, right? They just did their job. And I don't think your drivers are any different than my drivers. And that thank you really meant more to them. And I said to them, I knew you were deemed essential long before there was a toilet paper shortage. Just so you know, you were that more important to me. So just to see that happening, I think we need to continue that. I don't think you can say thank you enough to an individual, and just find every unique way that you can. For our industry on the bad side, and I will say, and as an ATA representative here today, that the legislative, and who says that elections don't have consequences? Elections have consequences, and we're going to have some headwinds in this next 4 years of the Biden administration. But we have opportunity too. So we've got to find those opportunities and just be present. And I'll say, I'll tag on to Mark here as far as the colleges and being present there. Do you all have your legislators, your state legislators' phone number in your phone? If you don't, go find out what it is, because that's how you're going to get money. They're the ones that are going to make sure that our colleges and all of our community colleges and our high schools, all of our career centers, so that our career centers can have simulators in our high schools so they can practice being a truck driver and get that introduction. So not only do you need to have your state legislators, I do, and they hear from me frequently, and I'm like a greasy wheel. And you have to like to grease that wheel, because they're human beings. There are a lot of industries that come in and meet with our legislators, and they can't know everything about every industry. It's our job to tell them what we need in our industry. We need to tell them we have a driver shortage and we need their help to fix it in these different ways. There's many ways to approach it, but if we don't tell them, they don't know. And they should get tired of hearing it from us.
Agreed. Ellen, just if you can touch on maybe some of the biggest challenges from your perspective over the past year. And if there's anything you want to add to that question, feel free to.
To the industry as a whole, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Well, I asked a driver one time, what's a gravy load? When the driver talks about a gravy load, and they said it's a load with no surprises. So what have we given them over the last year? Uncertainty, okay? Can you go into this place? Can you not go into this place? Should you wear a mask? Should you wipe down your truck? Where are you going to get the supplies to wipe down your truck? Is this place open? I mean, is that rest area open? Can you go in and eat at a truck stop anymore? Or do you have to drive through and break off somebody's overhead because a truck doesn't fit in there? It's been uncertainty, 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 uncertainty. And what's a gravy load? A load with no surprises. So I think that's been the biggest challenge, is that we just don't know.
Well, and we talk about, telling your story, and so much of that relates to brand awareness. So I would like to ask a few of you, maybe starting with Mark, how do you view the importance of advertising for brand awareness?
I'm for it.
Brought to you by CDLLife.
Yeah, you got to tell your story. And I mean, there's platforms that you have to use. That's been said. I mean, the advertising here is what I'll relate it back to our workforce issue, because I want us to spend as much money as I can find in every pocket that we can find, not to put in my pocket, not to run some glossy ad to make myself feel good, but to move the needle on people going into our workforce. So when you look at your ad dollars, whether it's any marketing budget, ask the question, why are we spending this money and what result do we want from it? And it's sometimes hard to point to the spend to the actual result, but if you at least ask that question, you have a strategy behind it. So I look at us. When I inherited this job, when I came into this job, I inherited a public relations effort that we were doing that spent about, I'll just tell you, $70,000 to buy a TV spot on CBS 2:30 SEC college kickoff. It was the commercial spots right before kickoff. And Alabama and Auburn got a lot of 2:30 games that year because they were both good a couple years ago. And so we got a lot of exposure from that ad, but it was one ad, so it was not a penetration ad. And I asked the question, it's not driving people to take action. And the two spots we did told our story for Alabama trucking. They were great. There were two that rotated, and they were really well done spots. They're on our website if you're interested. But being a political guy, I've done a lot of campaigns, done a lot of marketing efforts for different advocacy issues and products. But I asked the question, why are we doing this? Why are we about to blow $70,000? Which is not a lot of money in advertising, by the way. But the answer to that question was not to recruit more people. It was to tell our story, but who is really going to see that? It's to generate pride amongst the people that we have to go convince to buy into doing more. So we were talking to our own folks with that, and it made them feel proud. It showed them action. It showed them results. So you know what? It was worth the money. Ask why you're doing it, and then track it. And so that's how I would answer that question. And I'm also for it.
I'm going to ask one more question, but before I do, I just want to take a poll. How many of you have a question that you'd like to ask before we break? Because I want to make sure we are wrapped up by 5 with what's next. So we have a few at least. Okay, cool. Sherri, I'm going to ask you this last question, and then I'd like to open it up to the audience. And this is pretty vague, pretty open. What can the industry do to make things better?
A lot of things. Definitely that home time, the family, and there's something that, and I when I come to these things, I always want to have takeaways. So I hope you have it. And it's something that we've worked on and learned in the last, I guess since through the pandemic, is that communication. But we're reaching out to the home. We're sending our brand home. We want to know what's important to the spouse, male or female. We have single moms. We have single dads that are raising leaving the child at home and childcare, and So we're doing things to reach at home and making sure that not only is the driver becoming part of our culture, our Garner culture, but the family is becoming part of our culture, and they don't want to leave it. They want to stay because they feel welcome. That family, we said family was important. You said you're going to get my spouse home, and they would do their 34 or their 34 or their 48 at home, and by gosh, we make sure that happens. So family is our brand, and so that's what we have really worked really hard this last year, is to get in the home.
And I think family is not just your brand, which is great. I think it's our brand, the industry's brand. That's what it really needs to be. And frankly, that's what attracts me. Well, I should say, not attracted me to the industry because I didn't know any better. But once I got here, I realized that is what exists. If you give, you'll get in spades. And so it's important for us, I think, to embrace what Sherri just shared. Is there a mic floating around, or does anybody want to? There we go. All right. Show of hands. Who's got a question?
Ellen, a couple of years ago, you were pretty instrumental in helping design OEM trucks for women in the industry. Haven't heard much about that lately. Are you still involved? Is the OEM still seeking your advice on that kind of stuff?
Yeah. In fact, we're not designing trucks for women. I just want to make that clear. We're working with the OEMs to design trucks that accommodate women. So that means more flexibility. But a couple things that I have challenged them to do is, and we get feedback from all of our drivers and go to the OEMs and say, what about this? What about this? What about this? And a couple things that came out, and Peterbilt did this recently. They put what they call the pass-through seat on the passenger side. They call it the pass-through seat. It's actually a potty underneath, so that you can put your porta potty in, slide it in from the outside, and then when you need to use it, you slide it in on the inside. So that's an option at Peterbilt. I've challenged all the OEMs to put an alarm system. How many of you have alarm systems in your home? I do. If somebody broke in right now, the cops would be at my house in 2 minutes. Why can't we do that in a truck? That's their home. And so I've asked the OEMs, put an alarm system. Well, Peterbilt, Volvo has one, you push a button. Okay, you have to be awake and you have to be in your cab. Peterbilt put one in, you have to push a button. I said, no, you don't get it. I want, if somebody tries to break into that truck, the horns blare, the lights go off, whether the driver's sleeping or in the truck stop. I want somebody to know that somebody's trying to break into that truck. And one other thing, and this is what I call the dirty little secret of the trucking industry, and I'm working on it. How many of you have similar keys that fit your trucks? Don't raise your hand. Okay? How safe is that for our female drivers who are at a truck stop knowing that every one of the drivers that work for that company with a similar truck have a key to get in their truck? Do you know how many horror stories I've heard? So working with a company about either contactless or somehow maybe the same key for the ignition for all of them, but why should we put our drivers in peril when they're sleeping in their home? So yes, thank you for asking that question, and our work is not done.
Got some other questions I saw. There we go.
Dave.
Thank you. I've been in the industry 7 years now, so a lot less than many of you. But my question is, and I agree that we have a good opportunity here because of the goodwill that's being shown to truckers right now. What do we need to do as an industry so that, because honestly, and no reflection on people, but I've been hearing this at these types of events for that 7 years I've been in the industry. What do we need to do differently so that 7 years from now we're not here repeating the same thing, so that we can truly implement change? What needs to change?
I'm going to take the first stab at that. What Nike says, just do it. I mean, we talk about it all the time, but we've got to execute. And we have to do that consistently. Anybody want to add to that?
I will share too. I mean, just think of all the individuals that are introduced to our industry every day that come through truck driving school. They're so excited. You remember the first day of school, right? Or the first day, first day of classes is a brand new start. Because for a lot of these individuals, it's a second career. And so they come into our industry thinking that, okay, this is American dream. I'm going to drive my own truck. I'm going to see the country. And they have terrible, terrible experiences. Not only do maybe it's the company that they're working for, they've let them sit for 4 hours, not making a dime, or they've had a bad shipper. I challenge we have got to get our shipping community involved in this, or we are going to lose, period. Because the tide's going to change. And if there's any time that we have awareness from our shipping community, it's right now. And if our one of my customers treats one of my drivers bad, I mean, they're done. We have a conversation. You can't provide a facility for my driver's not coming to your facility. We'll find someone else that will. So I guess we are our own worst enemies sometimes when we leave a driver out. We say we're going to get them home and we don't. Shame on us. We say that we're going to pay them to do this work and we don't. Shame on us. So we have to follow through. But then we have to challenge our vendors, our shippers to follow through and treat them as human beings as well.
Yeah, great point. Do what you say you're going to do. No, actually, come on. A couple more claps. Yeah, come on. All right, I think we might have time for one or two more questions before we conclude. Any other hands? By the way, did you hear that phone notification earlier? It rang a couple times. That was me texting someone back there to get me that bourbon on the rocks. I still haven't seen it yet. You think I'm kidding? No, actually, first, one more thing. I do want to thank Travis again just for being a visionary. I think today's presentation that he did this morning was fantastic, and I think a lot of us in here were like a lot of note taking, and just even though we thought we all knew what we were doing, that was so helpful and educational, and being such an innovative and progressive minded person, putting this together, I think was really special. And thank you, Travis. Thank you for letting me come and share the stage with these four panelists. So please join me in thanking Travis as well as these four folks here. And I believe at this time I'm turning it over.